So we're going to take a look at how to identify the TCP IP settings on our computer. And we're going to first do this graphically through our control panel. Now here in control panel, what we're going to do, let's go back to our categories. And in fact, if I wanted to up here, I could just type in under the search options. We haven't tried that one before. Network settings. So now that I've done that, you'll see, or I should say not settings, we actually want network connections. I'm thinking about it. So we get to the network connections, and what we want to do is view network connections over here. And from that, you can see that it brings up the different types of network cards that I have. Now these two that say VMware are for some virtual machines that we had created, are still being identified. We're using this local area connection as the one that is our connections. And just as a side note, all of these consoles can be, if you like to memorize things, you could have gotten to through the control panel or through the start menu. This one is called ncpa.cpl, and if I type that in, it brings me basically to the same window that I just saw. So it's a matter of, as you get used to this and knowing some of these little shortcuts. But otherwise, that search up here is very useful sometimes in getting through control panel. All right, so what we're going to do here is take a look at this, like I said, this particular card. Now, before I do that, there are going to be times when you may be having troubles with communications, and Microsoft does have some diagnose this connection wizards where I could click on it, and it would try to go through and see if there, if it could find some of the more common problems, and tell you if there were any. And of course, here it says couldn't identify the problem. Well, that's because there wasn't one. But it does at least try to look at the easy stuff like no address or the PIPA address that we talked about. I'm going to right-click this local area connection. We're going to go to its properties. From its properties, you can see which protocols it's going to use for communications. And some of these, of course, deal with, as you can see, with the virtual machine, some with quality of service. The one we want is this Internet Protocol version 4. We're not going to worry about the link layer topology discovery. We're not doing any of the work of tunneling. I could double-click this. I could right or just highlight it as it is and click on Properties. And there I can see from what it's showing me that it's set to obtain an address automatically, which means it's using it from a DHCP server. The same with the DNS server. It's wanting to get that address automatically. Now you could, if you wanted to, click on the box for use the following IP address, and you could manually create the address. Oops, I didn't put the rest of it in there, that you want to use. But the problem with doing this manually is, did you get an address that is unique on the network? Again, the subnet mask and the IP address are the minimum you need to be able to talk to anybody else on your subnet. If you do know the address of the gateway, now you'll notice I'm typing in 3 digits and it automatically moves it to the next octet. In that case, when I hit the number 1 and it did not move it, just hit the dot on your own and it moves it just fine for you. And I'll choose this globally available DNS server that a lot of us like to use, 4.2.2.2. Okay. I'm going to go back to obtain automatically. And remember I said that if you're obtaining an address automatically and that service fails, that if you go to the alternate configuration, instead of getting that PIPA, automatic private IP address, you could have a backup address, one that might be useful in case either you lose your lease or, like I said, some other failure occurs. And now, the reason it put in the 255s for me automatically is because it saw this first number and realized that it was a Class C address. But you can still change those values if you are doing some other type of subnetting. Again, I could use the DNS server. Now, the WINS server I'm not going to put in here. That was an older Microsoft technology that was used before they were using DNS names, what they called a NetBIOS name. And it was a server that would tell you the IP address on a NetBIOS name. So again, if I like these settings, they would be the alternate for, as I said, when all else goes bad. At least it's going to validate the settings to make sure everything you have is appropriate. Again, I'm not going to do that because I don't want to lose my network connection. And now I'm also going to click on Cancel here so that I'm not making any changes to my network card. One of the other options I had when I did the original right-click was to go to status. When I go to the status, one of the things you can see is an indication if packets are moving. And this is kind of useful because if you're worried about connectivity back and forth and you see the bytes back and forth being sent and received, that number should go up pretty drastically if I were to open up the web browser. Now that I just opened up Bing, you can see the packets are moving just fine. It also tells me the speed at which the card is running, 1 gigabits, that it's been up for a while, that the IP4 address appears to be connected to the internet. If I click on the Details button, it'll show me the address that was assigned to me. Now let's actually look at the very top. Besides telling me the type of manufacturer of card that it is, I have the MAC address. That's the burned-in address on the card. Remember, the first 3 bytes are the vendor, and then this is the number assigned by the vendor. We did get our address from a DHCP server. That's how we enabled it. There's the address, .18. The subnet mask looks appropriate for that, what should be a Class C. We got the lease on the 14th. It's going to expire on the 16th. And then it looks as though our default gateway is also the DHCP server, is also the DNS server. But those are values that are coming from the DHCP server that we were talking about before. The link local address is the same as an PIPA address for IP version 4. It's the default configured address for your computer under IP6. One of the benefits of IP6 was that it did its own self-assignment. But we're not getting any more information because we're not in an IP6 network. Now I'll go ahead and close that. Again, the same options that we had across the top are down here with the ability to disable or diagnose. And since I started here on the status, I could still get to the same property box that I had before. All right, so that is a good way of being able to go through, as I said before, and to identify what type of settings or even how to change the settings on your network card.